We'll go to Superintendent Bouchard's report. And as he's indicated, all of the highlighted ones are some things that are in his portfolio and attached to our Charlie, help me here.
Or priorities.
Priorities, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, did you want to deal with your report first?
Oh, I dealt with it. I was asking if there were any questions.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Which there was none. So we move straight to
My apologies.
Oh, Don, I see your hands up.
This was a question for Mr. Bouchard. As far as the faith leadership, the last thing there is supporting the Leduc Hub through a central office fund by sponsoring 2 nights. What is, my question is, what is Leduc Hub? And what do you mean by 2 nights?
So that was a central office fundraiser that we were quite happy about our success. It was organized by Assistant Superintendent Malloy. I'll ask her to speak to it, please.
So Leduc Hub is definitely, that's the center for Leduc where they have social supports. And Leduc Hub, they've created a house here in Leduc that houses 12 homeless individuals each day. And that's the amount of space they have in the hub house. And with the sponsorship of $250 a day, you can sponsor the running of that house. That means 12 individuals have shelter for the evening, and they also have warm meals, warm beds, blankets. So that's the cost to run the shelter for a whole night for the maximum capacity that they have. So that is the Leduc Hub for the homeless. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Trustee Tagwood, your hand is still up. I'm acknowledging that.
I just had a question about the new wellness coordinator. Is that a brand new position, or is just what does that encompass?
So as a division, we were unable to hire a psychologist. So in consultation with administrators, we hired a division wellness worker, and I'll get Assistant Superintendent Cardinal to maybe explain a little bit about what that person does.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, so this individual was hired in December to start the beginning of January, and she comes with a wealth of background, with a counseling background, as well as having served as an FSLW from K to 12. This person will be helping to support students who perhaps need more support in the schools, or also connect families with outside supports. There could be a variety of needs depending on the child. So they will be basically she'll be helping to triage any kinds of needs. One, like an example that happened today was that the coordinator worked with our director, Chris Puro, and they worked on transitioning a student back to school after having been at the Glen Rose. And so these are the kinds of things that they work on, essentially to help transition students and to work with students that are just in need. So it's in lieu of the psychologist. She can't do assessments, but she can certainly do a lot of the other things that a psychologist can do. So we are just contracting out for the psychological services.
Okay, thank you.
I also am curious, she will be attending all 12 schools. She will be working with all the schools in our division.
Yes, absolutely, she will be. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And as you all do know, that's pretty much the shortage of psychologists across the province. And that's why some of the mental health wait list is that long, because they don't come cheap and not many of them are around. It's recognized, Trustee Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I only have 2 questions this time for the report. Both my questions actually come under leading learning, number 5. My first one has to do with bullet number 7. in meeting with school administration for continuous school improvement planning focused on board priorities and school directed needs. I'm just wondering if this can be expanded on and what were some of the outcomes of that meeting.
So there's a set agenda. We meet 3 times a year with the school administration. So in the first meeting, it's all 3 superintendents. In the January and May meetings, it's just the school ops assistant superintendents that meet with the school. So it's a review of the school's annual education results report. So there's a conversation about how things are going. There's also conversations about, what's your consultation plan look like over the next few months that can direct your education plan. It's school identified issues that they need to bounce off of us. It's also talking about how central office can support them in their work. But again, it's just touching on all the items in the education plan and the board priorities and how the school's progressing on that. It's really a check-in and a support system.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can I move ahead with my second question?
Yeah, go to your second question.
Thank you. Bullet number 19, in regards to the comfort kits during the lockdown. That made me smile when unfortunately, it made me smile. Lockdowns are never fun or easy for anybody. But I'm just wondering where the idea for comfort kits came from. A positive note that this is being done. I really like the idea. I was just curious as to where that idea came from.
So after the tragedy at Christ the King, we interviewed each staff member, on things that we could do better. When you go into a lockdown for an extended period of time, for example, students need to use the washroom. That's problematic when you're in a classroom. You can just imagine that. So what we put together, and staff talked to us about this, and they said there's some of these lockdown comfort kits in Calgary Catholic. So we reached out to them, kind of got a sense of what that was, and we put together our own kits. So I'll get Assistant Superintendent Malloy to maybe just speak about the items in there, because she was the one who oversaw the assembly and distribution of those.
Yeah, so as Superintendent Bouchard mentioned, going to the washroom is problematic, and making sure there is a secure and private space to do that in a stressful time. So in the bins, they are clear labeled bins, and the items in there are basically one-time use items. So you'd have a Mylar blanket, which would be a large blanket that would provide shelter should someone need to use the washroom. Receptacle for any bio waste, for using the washroom as well, toilet paper, water, should water be needed, hand sanitizer for cleanliness. Those are the types of items. Of course, rubber gloves, and items for anything that may be needed of that nature. And it's in a nice container, so it's easy to store in a classroom on a shelf there.
And I'll just add that there's we're supplying one for each classroom in the division.
Trustee Sarah, I see your hands up. Please we'll go in that order.
I was just wondering, Charlie, since we were unable to hire a psychologist, and a psychologist requiring a very large salary, and we instead hired a wellness person, would we have been able to hire perhaps 2, since we're having so many mental health concerns? I was just wondering, if we had already allotted for X number of dollars for a psychologist, and whereas we hired a
wellness worker. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually no savings. The reason is the wellness worker is quite a bit cheaper in salary. However, the psychologist normally does assessments as well. Now we have to contract those out. So we are still paying an outside contract. Well, we're actually using more than one psychologist to provide those assessments. I think we've budgeted for 30 psychological assessments this year, as well as helping the central office staff here, if we have severe needs students, they can be a consultant. So in the end, between contracted services and the internal services, it works out to about the same amount of money.
Thank you for that, managing that operation. Because 30 for the entire school division, that's a lot. And we know there's more need for those assessments. Yeah. Trustee Tagwood, go ahead, please.
Yes, I just noticed that you put that you collaboratively wrote an article.
You froze. You're still freezing.
Be quite interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes, better.
I was just saying you collaboratively wrote an article on student and staff wellness for CAS. And I wonder if, I think I would like to read that, or is it something that you cannot share?
So that that's an italicized item. So that was Assistant Superintendent Cardinal, who made a submission. Maybe she can speak to it. We would be happy to share that with trustees. Absolutely.
I would find it interesting. I would love to read
Yeah.
it.
Do you want to just overview that?
Sure, I would love to. So essentially, we were approached by the editor of the CAS magazine after we had presented at the CAS conference. And we had done a dual presentation with Golden Hills School Division. And so another director and myself put together an article in conjunction with Dr. David Tranter, who is the author of The Third Path, which is the framework which we're using in the division for student wellness and staff wellness. So the approach that we took was essentially lessons learned in the implementation of The Third Path. So, maybe what we were considering doing and what we've learned from it. And this is all framed within the pandemic. So we've submitted the article to the editor, and then the editor is going to then edit it. And so it's not in final form yet. When it comes out in the magazine, then it will be, we'll be able to share it then.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And you all do receive that magazine, so we'll be at central office. Awesome. Thank you. Any other comments on Mr. Bouchard's report? Okay. We'll move to Secretary Treasurer's report.
Mr. Chair, I had a notation that you wanted Superintendent Bouchard to speak about the
Yes.
Beaumont High School.
Yes, sorry. Superintendent, yes, sorry, 6.4, continue with Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of items to mention. First off, we have a meeting with the mayor and council. Chair Efon, Trustee Taylor Sirois, myself, and Vice Chair Tugwood will be attending their committee of the whole meeting on February 15th, where we'll have a short 15-minute window to talk to the city of Beaumont about progress regarding land acquisition for a new Catholic high school. It's our understanding that they're meeting at their January committee of the whole meeting. So we're looking for a follow-up on that. So that's the first item that I'll mention. At 10:20, just before our board meeting or committee of the whole meeting today, I received some good news that I wanted to share with trustees, and that is the planning funds of $25,000 has been approved by capital planning. So we can now proceed with hiring an architect to see what a high school would look like on a small footprint of land, specifically the piece of property in Lakeview that's 8.4 acres. We just got that news just before we met today, so I'm happy to pass that along, and that's some good news. We haven't had a lot on that project regarding land and acquisition of land. So I know I've asked Secretary Treasurer Lotka to reach out to the architect that we had preliminary discussions with and go ahead and proceed with that work. So yeah, I just wanted to update trustees on those two items. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. So that's good news. Meaning by the time we meet with them, if we can share that for them to know that we are also seriously working on our side, right? So then however they can move forward to make land possible, then They should. Trustee Sarah Taylor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Charlie, for doing that. And yes, that's very good news. And I really commend you for getting that application out and us getting our yes on it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll now move to Secretary Treasurer's report. Any comments or questions for clarification? Okay. Yeah, Trustee Miller, go ahead.
Thank you. I try to make my mouse a little faster, but sometimes I can't get quick enough there. Under facilities management, where it talks about participation in the City of Leduc site planning meeting, can you expand on that a little bit?
There's a standing committee with the City of Leduc that includes Black Gold School Division as well as officials from administration from the City of Leduc. That's under an existing agreement that we meet annually. And the intent of that is to look at the existing school sites that have been either assigned or exist within the planning of the city. In some cases, it might be reviewing specific sites and whether they are still viable as a school site and perhaps relinquishing them back to the city for the city's purposes. The other aspect of those meetings typically are looking at future developments, area structure plans, and also expanding in terms of the city's planning of when the next school sites are most likely to be needed by either jurisdiction. And then looking at how we go about assigning that site to a particular school division in addition to what their submission is for a capital project for a new school.
Okay, and am I to understand that that is a standing annual meeting with the City of Leduc?
That's correct.
Thank you. Good to hear.
Which is nice to have that cooperation, right? Standing, you know, the city is growing. So what are you doing? Schools come with growth, and then you don't have to worry about it. Because the schools are at the table telling you, yeah, we need this, we don't. Move to the next location as the city expands. So that is very, very honorable of Leduc to be doing that. And then thank you, Mr. Latka, for taking care of the busing issue and drivers issue for us and around the Drayton Valley area. So thank you, and thank you for your continuous support. pushing for drivers and looking for drivers for our contractors to help them out. That's what we all do, right? The need is there. So what can we do in partnership to support each other to get our students into the classrooms? So thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Latka, I will leave all this money matter to you now.
I see Trustee Tugwood has her hand up.
Of course, I have a question about Father Lacombe. Are we still on track for a September 2nd opening?
At this point, we're hopeful that the school will be turned over to us on September 2nd. We haven't had any indications that things have extended beyond that at this point. The contractor, of course, is got a lot of conditions that it's still subject to an inspection for occupancy on that date. Again, we're keeping it in the forefront in terms of planning for next school year and always trying to seek if there's other things that may impact that. Certainly, to report with the cold streak over the Christmas break, it was unfortunate. Because a lot of the construction was halted during the cold streak at the stage that the building's at, which is erecting steel. We're hoping warmer weather hits and we can kind of resume an accelerated process. But at this point, my last update this week was that they were still targeting that September 2nd handover date. As we move forward closer, there might be some discussions as well as discussions with the board on how the school calendar looks for Father Lacombe, just to allow for a transition that's appropriate at that time for that school to take place at the start of September in the new building.
Okay, thank you for the update. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll move to 6.5, please.
Mr. Chair, if I could start with the old 6.4 at first quarter financial report.
Okay.
So attached, and I know it's a little bit beyond. Normally, the first quarter financial report would follow the month following the end of the quarter, but we wanted to take an opportunity to realign this report from what had been previously submitted to the board. And what Financial Services is looking to align with is the annual education plan. And so in terms of reporting on the financial report, and just as an apology and a heads up to the rest of the board, the Finance Committee did not get a chance to see this draft. And what we are aiming to do until it was circulated out to the board as a whole. Future reports would be reviewed by the Finance Committee as they come in. So the information here is what we've put together based on our best information. And so especially with regards to the new information being presented. So at this point, what we've got is with the report, and it might be easier if I project my screen, then everybody can follow along with the same.
Please.
I'm told it's easier to follow along with Ed when you see what Ed is seeing.
Yeah.
So with regards to the first priority of the board, again, we've started out with what is the 3 priorities of the board, but looking to expand that so that we align with the 5 domains in the annual education plan. And then assigning costs to the strategies that are outlined in that plan. So the first area, growth in affirmed Catholic identity. What we've tried to represent here is faith development across all the areas, so that not only includes what our faith coordinator does, but also what schools have budgeted for and allowed for within their budgets. So the graph indicates that we've got slightly under $500,000. We are in the process. These figures might change on the next quarter report as we start to get the financial system aligned with this reporting style. So we've got just under $500,000 of expenditures budgeted for this year. Part of that is through the central office. Most of that is in the office of the faith coordinator. The other area is all the school-based expenditures, including items that may be centrally and then redistributed out to schools. So something like the evangelization, we centrally allow for $25,000, but we actually redistribute that out to schools. So we represent that as school-based expenditures. And then in comparison, we've got our expenses in terms of year to date being presented. And at this point, it's showing very light in the terms of the first quarter. A lot of those expenditures are related to some staffing costs. Not all the staffing costs here are fully aligned with reporting, but the intention here is to give you an idea of where the budget area is, how much we are contributing to this area, and where our expenditures in those reported areas are coming in at. With regards to the second priority, provide a high quality learning and working environments. Again, what we've tried to pull out is what areas look at, in terms of the first 2 bullets, professional development. So again, we've pulled out what's allowed for centrally and what's in school-based. Now, the school-based budgets look very small compared to the central items, but overall the budget total is just over 160,000. So that centralized portion is predominantly represented by expenditures under the Director for Curriculum and Student and Professional Development. Again, the expenditures look very low as we align the financial reporting to what we're trying to present to trustees. And we're in the process. And again, I think the expenses are underrepresented for this area, and for the second quarter, we'll have better information. The key thing under professional development, and that's been highlighted by my discussions with the superintendent, of course, is that none of these expenditures include our substitute costs. And when we have professional development opportunities, whether it's just utilizing the director or an outside party, typically we have a number of staff that are in attendance, but we have to have replacement staff in their place. So the highest cost typically for professional development for us is the cost of those replacement staff or the substitutes. And right now that's not represented in the expenditure side or in the budget or in the expenditures. And we're looking to kind of identify that to give you a better picture of what expenditures are being done under professional development. Again, trying to align the reporting to those key aspects under our education plan. Supporting students in their journey, ensuring all students are successful leaders. So the first bullet there is regarding First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students are successful. What we've pulled out again is our expenditures with regards to First Nations and Métis split up between centralized and school budget. Those central office expenditures have been actually subsequently redesignated, including the wellness workers support that have been allocated to Sacred Heart and St. Augustine. And in terms of year to date, one of the things I do know as we were reviewing these is those positions weren't filled until after the first quarter. So our expenditures look very low even on a central level because placements hadn't taken place until after that first quarter. Also under that area is a focus on student mental health and well-being, as well as a focus on students with learning challenges. So again, we've extracted out those areas dealing with specialized learning supports. You'll notice it's a substantial budget area. Earlier today, we did a briefing on funding from the province, as well as our internal allocations with trustees, and noted that funding under our special needs area is over $3.7 million. So that's where a large chunk of this budget area comes from. There are also other areas and supports that we pool and provide supports to students. So the budget area for this comes under just under $5 million. And a lot of that is, of course, school-based. That's the intent of our budget, is to make sure that we have impact the students directly. Expenses for this area predominantly, again, are school-based and are appearing as our year-to-date. So again, to get some sense of where our expenditures, what sort of the amount is that we are planning for, and how that aligns with our expenses in terms of year-to-date. We've provided some text in terms of budget assumptions. Again, budget is based, all the information on the budget at this point is based on this approved budget back in May of 2021. And in terms of our audited financial statement, that is also the budget that is used for comparison purposes. So what we've done is provided the board with where that spring budget was set, what the resources were, and how it compares to our year-to-date at this point in time. One of the things that you may note is that the property tax component of our budget is showing 0 in terms of collections. Those payments are periodic, but follow a calendar year period. So we'll be seeing payments starting to arrive in December. What I've talked to financial services is also recognizing that those payments accrue regularly and routinely, and rather than recognizing them when they're actually paid, is to build those accruals in place so that it does show a level income that is actually occurring. In terms of the payments themselves for property taxes, we receive money from municipalities in proportionate to the property tax when people have allocated and identified that they belong and support Catholic education. And that money is then repaid back to the province because the province funds school boards equally. And so although the Catholic school, us as Catholic school board, have the right to set our own mill rate, the province funding structure doesn't allow us to receive more money than what we would receive from the government. So it's a bit of an in and out, but as past trustees and boards have indicated, it's an indication of how much people are supporting or whether there is work in terms of trustees ensuring that Catholic education is supported within their communities. And annually, we do send a letter out to ensure that tax ratepayers are making that election to support Catholic education annually. In terms of our revenues overall, we are where we would expect in terms of timelines. We're at about 25%. Given that where we are in our fiscal year after the first quarter, we should be at around 25%. In terms of expenses by programs, likewise, we're still in that neighborhood of about 25% with the two exceptions. Instruction in terms of pre-K, that is pre-kindergarten students that have been identified as students of need, and so are included in terms of supported by the provincial government funding. Again, this is an area that we always look at in terms of getting our cost allocations, and it takes some time to get our alignment of whose staff costs in line with the students that are being served. So I'm looking that probably by the next quarter report, you'll see more alignment to expenditures there, because I think that's being underreported at this point in time. The other area that's not is outside of that 25% marker is transportation. Transportation basically operates for 10 months. So rather than using a 12-month model, we talk about 1/10. So we should be at about 30% for transportation costs in terms of budget, and that's where we're landing up. System administration seems a little high at this point, but we upfront a number of memberships and costs with regards to administration. And so one of that being the Alberta School Boards Association membership fees. We pay, 87% of those fees up front in September. We pay the other 12% in April because their billing follows government funding and government year ends. So we upfront a number of costs, and as well as licensing fees for software and those types of expenditures. So it's showing a little high, but over the course of the year, that generally levels out and falls in alignment with the 1/12 per month expenditure ratio. We also provide for trustees an idea of what revenues that we have but have not spent as of yet. Again, this information was at the request and support of the previous board, just because not all revenues are brought into that income statement. And so to have a sense of where the division is financially, I think deferred revenues presented also gives you a sense of where the division is financially. Again, trying to align your quarterly reports with our audited financial statements. We've reproduced this schedule in terms of year to date, which is the same as what you see in the financial statements in terms of expenditures, not only by program, but by category. So you'll see the line items for certificated staff, for instruction, board and system administration. So that categorization and kind of broader detail being presented in part of your quarterly report. At the bottom, we've identified the spring approved budget by program again, and to indicate whether the percentages are above and below. In terms of the report itself, we're looking to get that the printing is a little bit more clear. It's not my intention to use the ultrafine print all the time, but sometimes the tables themselves don't lend that too well. So we'll be looking at the formatting of that as well. Again, I've talked about the programs themselves. One of the things that looking at certificated salaries overall in terms of our budget as opposed to our actuals, they are in line. Our non-certificated salaries, which is lines 20 and 21, are looking at 27 and 30%. That's not unusual as we look at finalizing staffing that are assigned to children in need. In most cases, as we identify those students, we also have contingencies that are established to help support them that may not have been reflected in the budget in terms of staffing costs associated with here. It might have been costs associated with supplies and services or certificated staff. But generally speaking, we are aligned in terms of our expenditures with supporting student needs. In terms of how each of the individual schools, as you may or may not be aware, each of our schools we use a decentralized model in terms of budgeting. So each of our schools gets a budget. If you ask me, I would describe it as monopoly, where we give a pool of funds to a school. We set some parameters. Every teacher costs so much. Every support staff costs so much. Establish a budget that meets the outcomes that you are setting for your school, as well as meeting the priorities of the board and the province. We want to be able to present that to trustees and saying, how are schools doing in terms of the budget? We've switched this rather than a table format to more of a graphical format, because I think it gives you a quick review of where school budgets are at. The one thing just to be clear about in terms of schools' decentralized budgets, this does not include what schools have assigned for staffing. So this excludes the staffing component of their budget. It's everything else but staffing. For the simple fact that staffing is kind of a fixed cost, and I think doesn't add any information in terms of where a school stands. Once they've hired staff, for the most part, especially teaching staff, they're not going to change that staffing very easily to affect a budget change if they need to. So we focus more on the supplies and services end of the school budget in something that they can control or modify within the year more easily. And the last one is where we're at in terms of our operating reserves, capital reserves, and our unrestricted surpluses. In terms of operations, what we are showing here is what was budgeted for this year. Still, we haven't done any projections for this year to see where we would end up. At this point, based on the budget that was submitted, we'd be ending the year with an unrestricted surplus of $1.8 million and operating reserves of 1.1. There's a couple of items there that haven't been factored in yet. Is that the board had set aside over $350,000 in operating reserves that would be brought back into unrestricted surplus to support schools and school allocations. So those figures haven't been factored into that unrestricted surplus at the end of the year. In terms of board motions for supporting any recovery of funding from this year, that motion is still appropriate, and we do have the resources to fund that. So that is the quarterly financial statement in brief, with a bit of an explanation of what the reporting is intended to convey to trustees and to the general public. We're working on getting that alignment improved, but it gives you an idea of where we're at this point in time. I've tried to indicate in the backgrounder that the statement of operations is absolutely correct. The charts about the individual areas under the board priorities and the eventual alignment with the education plan, we're still working on, but I want to give the board a sense of what those charts would look like moving forward and how we're trying to provide an alignment with the education plan in our financial reporting moving forward. Don't think anybody's fallen asleep thus far, so are there any questions?
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Latka. Yeah, that's money matter. So for all I can say is we are in good hands for now. So
See, Trustee Miller has a question.
Yeah. Trustee Miller, go ahead.
Thank you for that thorough presentation. It did answer some of the questions that I did have. I wanted to note that on the Schedule A, allocation of revenues and expenses, how the line items were numbered, I really appreciate that, as having to read these and refer back to items that they are numbered. So I really appreciate that. But my question actually had to do with the deferred revenue summary. Two items on that list, I just would like some clarification as to what they are: the IF&E grant and Jordan Principal grant. And am I to understand that these are specific school or items that belong to specific schools?
So if it's a deferred revenue item, means that it has parameters that are imposed on the jurisdiction externally. So any item here means that the division does not have any discretion on how they're used. They can only be used for what is identified. In terms of the IF&E grant, that was a grant program for First Nations, Métis and Inuit education. Those grant monies have been with the division, and the period to expend them has been extended a couple of times. So that is specific to be utilized for supporting First Nations students. Those funds are actually being utilized this year to support an Assistant Superintendent Cardinal will correct me if I'm wrong, a support worker working with FNMI students at Sacred Heart and St. Augustine for this year. So we are looking to expend those funds fully by the end of this year. They've been carrying over for a couple of years, but in terms of, not that we didn't have them planned for expenditure, our operations were significantly impeded last year with moving online, offline. And I think as we fine-tuned our education plan, we were able to address some priorities there with this money, which was, I think, a fantastic opportunity that we had. With regards to Jordan Principal Grant, again, that's externally restricted. We received those grant monies from the Maskwacis Educational School Commission, and it's equivalency funding for students with need that are First Nations and living on reserve. So there is a grant approval process that supports them, generally with direct staffing costs. Those monies can be only spent within the guidelines of each application and are essentially targeted to a specific student or students. So that, again, is fairly restricted in their purpose and use, but it arises for students of special needs who are residents of reserves.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I see none. Well, thank you, Mr. Laka. Like I said, this is thorough and this is just quarter financial. We will continue with you on the budget assumptions, please.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if the finance chair, Trustee Taylor Sirois, if it's all right, I'll start with the background information. Okay, thank you. So the board in the past has requested an opportunity to have input on items and recommendations going into next year's budget. So the process that had been identified was to have those items vetted by the Finance Committee in terms of inclusion into the budget. We'll be looking at budget 22-23. Preliminary work has already begun with administrators at the school level, administration here at central office, and now with the board itself. So with that, what the Finance Committee is looking for those items that trustees feel need some emphasis or some attention or resources assigned to them. So with the Finance Committee looking at that, what we're looking for, or what the Finance Committee is looking for, are there other strategies that the board would like to investigate, i.e. a new strategy is not previously listed in the education plan that will have a financial cost, or a standalone expenditure for operations or capital unrelated to the education plan. So those are things that you might want to contemplate as trustees. Is there, and certainly if there's questions in the meantime of whether items are or aren't included, I think that is part of the responsibility of the Finance Committee to kind of look at them and respond back and saying these items are, and or these items warrant further consideration. The committee identified some of the lenses that they'd look at those suggestions for consideration for of a monetary nature going into the budget for next year. Is the item included in the budgeting process already? Does it fulfill a board priority not addressed by budgeted processes already? Does the item support a board activity or action? Does the item impact any external limitations, i.e., when we're looking at expenditures related to board governance and administration, we do have a spending cap there. Is the item outside the scope of education? It's one of the things that as trustees, I think, as an industry, we struggle with in terms of, wanting to support kids, but then we move beyond supporting kids just in terms of educational need. And so we have to look at that and saying, is this a role for advocacy, because it really belongs in the realm of another area or field? And is the item impacting the entire division or a specific school community or group of individuals or students? So those are the lenses that the Finance Committee would look at any trustee suggestions for considerations of the budget. And then finally, what if you do have suggestions for consideration into budget 22-23, we're asking that you submit those to the chair of the Finance Committee, Trustee Taylor Servois, and a CC to me by the end of January, so that the Finance Committee can review it, review those items, and report back to you in your regular February meeting. Trustee Taylor Servois, if I missed anything.
No, I think you covered everything perfectly. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. So I believe this is pretty much very clear as to that's some of the way that we like to hear from trustees, right? You may know a need or something that you think would be beneficial to the entire division. Bless you, that we are not aware of. You could say, you know what, when I look at this, is that a way we could budget for it? We've done that in the past and we continue to do that. So those are some of the guidance that is projected. So you've heard Ed, by the end of January, if you find something that needs to then please send that email. Yep. Okay. There are no further questions or comments. All right. We'll move to 6.6 then, 6.7, Mr. Bouchard, for COVID update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's my intention here to provide you with a little bit of an overview of what we've seen in the last 7 school days, not including today because we don't have full data sets when I prepared this. So I'll just start off by talking about the student cases that we've had in the division. So there's been 161 cases in the 7 school days that we've had so far, which is quite a bit when you compare it to previous waves. I have before you here, you can see in the first week we had 92 cases. In the second week, 69 cases. And then you can also see by school, and you can also make your own connections in communities. I just let you have a quick look at that before I move on. So just as you're looking at that, I'll remind trustees that these are self-reported cases from students and families. So these are not coming to us via Alberta Health. There has been issues. We suspect there are more cases, but families are telling us they have no rapid tests to confirm whether it actually is a COVID case or not. So this is the confirmed positives. Trustee Tugwood?
That's what I was going to ask. Is this absentees or is this is confirmed? And you're saying it's just confirmed, but the number of absentees might be quite different from this number?
Correct. Okay. So of course, we can come back to any of these slides, but I'll move on. So now you have the staff cases by school. So week 1, we had 14 staff cases, week 2, 13 for a total of 27 staff cases. Again, these are a little different. Most staff have access to rapid testing, but not everybody, I would assume. But again, you can have a look by community. Also of note, whether it be student or staff cases, they're more so with students, there are situations we know of that families do not want to report. Again, this voluntary program, we ask that they tell us, but they're under no obligation. And some families just don't want to report. We know that as well. I'll move along unless there's a question on that slide.
Mr. Bouchard, and this again is self-reported by teachers, right?
Yeah, it's a little easier because staff will tell their administrator that they've tested positive. We're finding that's pretty much the case.
Okay, thank you.
Here's the student absenteeism that Trustee Tugwood was questioning. This week's been problematic because there's been bus cancellations all week. But you can see without bus cancellations, we're hovering around 11.5% to 13.5% absenteeism across the division. The numbers are a lot higher when buses don't run, obviously, but I think you can very well see that that's kind of where we fall between 11.5% and 13.5% absenteeism. Moving along. Now this is staff, and I think this is an important number to have here. So on the left, you can see the date, followed by the number of staff that were absent on that date. These are all staff, not just teachers, support staff, including custodians. On the third column from the left, you can see the percentage of staff absenteeism. You can see that, again, we're hovering probably somewhere averaging in the last little while around 13.5% staff absenteeism. Kind of mirrors the student absenteeism, quite honestly. But I'm most concerned about the right-hand column, which is absences that are not filled. This is problematic in schools, especially when you start to see numbers, between 6, 5, 10%. 10% is very problematic. When we get to those numbers, we start to see a lot of stress on the system, specifically the school. So we've got teachers who are losing preps, administrators teaching all day, not being able to administer the school. But what we're also finding problematic is that a lot of these absences are support staff, specifically support staff that are working with high needs students. So we are facing reshuffling. We've given our administrators direction that group is a priority. So for example, if we need to hire a substitute teacher to work with that child, we need to do that. Because it's not fair to say to the parents, sorry, you just have to keep your kid at home. That's not really an appropriate response. So we want to exhaust all options before we would do something like that. So those are just kind of some indications of how we're dealing with staffing and kind of what the reality is on that front. Regarding shift to at-home learning, kind of what we do is we weigh a number of factors. So we look at the class COVID cases in the last 5 calendar days, as well as the class percentage absenteeism, and that's specifically to illness. So far there's 4 classes that have moved online. 1 at Father Leduc, 2 at Father Lacombe, and 1 at Ecole Notre Dame. And that the 3 that you see in the last 2 bullets, that was just at the end of the day yesterday. Those decisions were made. And just to give you some sense of what kind of the reality is in these classes to go online. So in 1 case, in the last 5 days, there's been 8 positive COVID cases in that room. So in our mind, that's a little bit of a red flag. Transmissions happening in that class likely. So that's an example of a decision and what led to that decision. In 2 other of the situations, there's 2 classes, for example, that have 3 positive COVID cases, but the class has 41% illness. And staff are saying or administrators are saying to us, parents are saying those children are ill. Remember, these aren't medicals or anything else, or appointments to dentists or so on. But parents are saying my child's got COVID symptoms, but we have no rapid tests. So, for example, 3 positive confirmed cases, 41% illness in that room, we're sending that class home. So that's just kind of an idea of kind of what we're using between assistant superintendents, Cardinal, Malloy, myself, when we're looking at these on an individual case-by-case basis and how we're dealing with that. Trustee Tugwood?
Yes, I would have a question about what grades these are. And I wondered if
Mhm.
it's more problematic in grade K to 3 than it is from 4 to 12 where masks are used.
Yeah, so the one class is grade 7. The other ones are grade 1s. There's 2 grade 1s and 1 grade 3. Okay, moving along. Just some other things that I want to bring to the board's attention. First off, custodial shortages may prove problematic. We're starting to see some increased custodial absences. So we're strategizing around how to manage that. Pretty tough to operate a school without custodial. So that's in the works. We're trying to look at all kinds of scenarios and contingency planning on that front. We'll let you know that all schools are supposed to receive their shipments by the end of the day today. Right now, I've heard that 6 of 12 schools have received their shipments. Second shipments are supposed to start being sent out next week already. And then masks will continue to be sent every 2 weeks until students and staff have 8 weeks worth of masks. We're also tracking bus driver shortages. We've had one situation where a run couldn't operate because of no bus driver could be replaced. Again, I just again reiterate that the EA absences and the supports for inclusive needs students is problematic, and we're trying to plug holes there and make sure that those kids are supported to the best of our ability. So that is kind of a little bit of an update in the first 7 student days since the extended winter break was announced. I'd be happy to take questions related to any of the data sets that I've shown or other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchard. Any operational questions to clarify with Mr. Bouchard? I can't see everybody. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Bouchard, can you take this down then, please? Okay, I see Donna's hand is up.
Yes, I just thought of this. So are they sending masks for grades K to 12 from 4 to 12 where the masks are mandated?
So we've communicated to families that masks are strongly recommended in K to 3. The province is providing masks K to 12.
Yeah.
We're also supplying substitute teachers, bus drivers, and casual staff with masks and rapid tests as well. So it's the whole organization, students and staff.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the only complaint we've had, or somebody mentioned earlier, is that the masks are too big, right? And that again, we can make it known to our parents, as we all do know. I don't know how the supplies are coming in through the government, and like the minister mentioned, this is in coordination with 3 different ministries, right? Health itself, including infrastructure, to get all of it. So it's not easy coordinating and having everything fit and sizable, but again, I'll leave that to each parent's discretion. Go ahead, Trustee Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if, I guess there's an appetite or thought for our district to be providing our staff with the concerns about the numbers with a higher grade mask. I'm not medical at all. I don't know the levels of masks and the protections and their names and titles. But I'm just wondering if there's a conversation to be had there, or if there's, room for a motion in that area to be providing our staff with a higher grade or higher level of protection through masking. I'll leave it there.
Okay. So to answer that question, and in hearing the minister and the health experts that showed up, max is a max, and that's the best that they could provide right? So based on their expertise as is, this was they provided us. And I wouldn't like us to get into that debate or the science of it of a higher grade mask will be beneficial than this one, right? So then that's where we will mark up everything. Since we've made that decision to follow the recommendations, and that's the recommendation and the marks that they provided us, I'll just leave it at that for staff. And again, it doesn't preclude if any staff want to pretty much up their own marks for how they feel or how they determine that will be their own choice at this time, I would say. But if this is what government is supplying us, I would say we'll just stay that course and supply them back to our staff and students. Yep. Okay, is that satisfactory? Because that's the best of the answers in hearing from the minister and the health experts that we've met a couple of times. Okay.
I guess I would continue on with that in, I understand that the masks and the rapid tests actually came from Alberta Health, not Alberta Education or the Ministry of Education. But I'm just looking at the numbers of staff with absences, positions not being filled. That is an area of concern. And can we as a board order N95 masks or the K masks, or again, I'm not familiar with all of the titles, please forgive me, to be able to mitigate some of those issues. I was looking if there's an appetite by the board to entertain something like that, or I do know other districts that have moved in that direction for their staff because of staffing issues. So I was just kind of inquiring and trying to take a temperature as to what the board thinks of that discussion or that idea.
Okay. Probably I would leave this to Mr. Bouchard. If during his endeavors and working with all of these numbers, I understand that there could be a difference based on, again, on expertise or what we are hearing from the experts, then for sure, if he brings that back up as an operational matter and support, yeah, we can look at that.
Mr. Chair, I guess what I'll state, I guess, is I would need direction from the board. So first off, I believe there is a better protection from the KN95 than the masks that we're receiving. With that said, there's a cost that I think the board would have to weigh in on. So administration is not prepared to answer that question in this meeting. We could do some background on that and bring it back to your attention, either at a special board meeting or via email for thoughts. I'm not sure, but there are some divisions, as Trustee Miller has indicated, that are supplying their staff with KN95s, but there is an additional cost should the board direct us to, pursue that matter.
Okay. So Mr. Bouchard, yeah, go ahead and look through that if that's the appetite for the board. And we don't know what we don't know. When we hear about the cost, then we'll make some of those decisions at the time. Trustee Tagwood, I see your hands up.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea to have a look at the cost, especially for teachers who are working in large classrooms where none of the children are masked, say with K to 3. So if we can look at a better protection, I think the N95s or the K ones certainly are, but we need to know the cost and how many you would need and everything around it. So if you could look into it, I'd be in agreement with that. Thank you.
All right. So that's the will of the board. Mr. Bouchard, you have your answer.
Mr. Chair, I've heard from just 3 trustees. Maybe you want to check in with the rest. And then I also would ask, so how do you want us to proceed when we have that information? I think you guys should have some discussion about what your next step is once we provide that information to you, so that we're prepared to respond one way or another.
Okay.
But I think maybe to hear from everybody would be good.
Yeah, I'll hear from around Mr. Lena. What's your position on this? Want to investigate it, bring back costs?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be worthwhile with the administration kind of investigating it a bit. I mean, COVID spread around so much at this point, it might not matter what mask we have. We're all going to get it eventually, probably. So, but worth investigating into. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Taylor Sarah.
We already have masks. Let's just stay with that.
Trustee DeMarco.
As Trustee Lerner stated, I think with the intense spread of COVID, I don't know if we would, if once we get the information and get the masks, I don't know if we would have a timely enough decision made to actually make a huge difference. So I'm with Liz. I think we should just stick with what we've already got and not use extra funds for something that hopefully will peak and be done very soon.
Okay, thank you for your comments there. Trustee Burke.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. I think we're not going to have enough time to maybe upgrade the masks and just kind of wait and see.
Okay. Right. So for myself, yeah, I'm in support that let's investigate it, bring back costs, and then make that decision there. And then again, that gives us about a week. So to look into that, when you have the information, yeah, email it to all trustees, right? Communicate it to all trustees, and then we can have that discussion if we need to call a special meeting to move forward or not, please. Okay. All right. Thank you. So that's our COVID update. So we'll go to 6.7, Tunis for tuition. Tunis for tuition. So who all here has heard about Tunis for tuition before, apart from the old trustees? Okay. Yeah, Michael, I see Jolene, Don. Trustee Miller, have you heard of Tunis for tuition before? Okay, so pretty much we are all aware of it. So our division, a few years back, because we do support these when we go to events here and there, but made a formal decision to continually support them. So that was the point when if you needed to make ongoing support to the program, you talk to Mr. Latka, the money keeper, and then fill out a form, and then it takes whatever you wish to support them with. Then at the end of the year, it's all calculated as to how much the school, our division, entire division, have supported the tuition, Tunis for tuition program. As well, during graduations at our high schools, we pitch to them again to support that through a donation during their ceremonies. Okay. That money goes to help, since you've all heard about it before, provinces that don't have Catholic education supported through their public funding. So in essence, that's the support we give Tunis for tuition. When I spoke with Mr. Latta, I don't know if he got a time to see how much we've supported. Were you able to pull that out?
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I ended up with other priorities and I didn't pull that information out.
Yeah, so that's fine. So I'm bringing that back to the attention of trustees, both old and new, and that's what we do to support. So if you are interested, yeah, talk to Mr. Latka, and then that comes out of your monthly payment as to how much you want, and then that is taken off before your deposit is done. Okay, I see your hand up, Trustee Tagood.
I was just going to add that usually you will be sent a tax receipt at the end of the year. So I believe that's correct, isn't it, Mr. Latke?
Yes.
That is correct. Payroll deductions remitted for Toonie's tuition, which is through the Canadian Catholic School Boards Association. We send them a summary document and they issue a tax deductible receipt from them directly. We don't provide the tax receipt from STAR for that program.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that piece. Yeah. Okay. Any questions there? No. All right. Okay. What are our good news stories? Any good news stories around the division? Come on, you just got $25,000 for Beaumont. That's a good news story. Okay, Trustee Miller, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. In attending the Christ the King School Council meeting last night, which was actually quite a pleasure to attend last night specifically, but the administration forwarded an invitation to Trustee DeMarco and myself for a school tour. So we're going to look at setting a date for that and moving forward with that. And moving forward with, they will be having a memorial mass on March 15th. Just of note of that, and they've got their graduation set, and the school seems to be moving right along and in a good directions in that. And that the outreach, the Feast of St. Thomas, who's the patron saint of the outreach, they will be looking at doing that on January 28th. So I was happy to hear that even during this time that they are looking for ways to move ahead in doing that and sharing that with the students. So.
Wonderful, thank you. Trustee DeMarco.
Just wanted to share an update with St. Ben's. One of the things that they are doing to increase their faith within the school is they're using the seven sacred teachings within their monthly assemblies. So it's gaining awareness of both faith in the school as well as connecting it with Indigenous culture.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for that. Trustee Tagwood.
I also attended the school council meeting last night for Father Lacombe, and it's really interesting because they have a student from grade 9 give a little report, and his report was all about how excited he was that they got to go swimming and skating and play curling. They did a curling bonspiel, and that they also played badminton, and because in the new gym they were able to do some of these things, and it was so great to see how excited he was about all these things they're able to do in their gym because they were able to use it. So that's my good news story.
Wonderful, thank you. My school council will be next week, so stay tuned if anything exciting happened there. Okay, I see no hands up. Okay. Good news stories is the positive path forward. I have to step out a bit here. So Trustee Tagwood, if you don't mind, I will hand over this for you, please, to continue the meeting while I stepped out.
Okay, we're just about finished, so that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, take it over.
So positive, this is 6.9, positive path forwards, and you can just have a look over.
Oh.
Over what, don't know.
You're frozen. Is that just me or everybody? She's frozen.
Yeah, Dawn is frozen.
Okay. Donna, you frozen. Okay, Trustee Miller, I see your hand up.
If there was anything.
Do we want to, did you need to step away, Henry, or are you good?
Yes.
Am I
But-
back? Am I still?
Okay.
You're frozen here and there.
It says my connection is unstable.
Okay. Now they can hear you clear. So go ahead. Yeah, I'm stepping out. Thank you.
Okay, okay. And if I freeze up again, let me know and I'll have to turn it over. So the positive path forward, you can bring that up on your agenda. And after that, the 6.10, the annual work plan. And it shows for January, which I think we've pretty well done everything. It's for January. It says the registration opens for the annual CCSTA Spring Conference, but I thought it wasn't opening until February. Perhaps I'm wrong. I will have to check into that. I know there's a couple of us, maybe 3 of us, that we're hoping to go to it and hoping that it will be in person. Can you still hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, good. I didn't know if I was talking to myself. So I'll have to check into that and see if you can register for that. This year it's going to be in Ontario at Blue Mountain Resort.
Trustee Tugwood, there's a hand up from Trustee Miller.
Oh, yes. Dawn, would you like to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question in regards to the positive path forward. I know in the discussions in creating the positive path forward that we had discussed doing a scan of events and happenings. I was wondering if that was going to be implemented into our agendas moving forward, or if there was a date that would start. And I know that the chair has stepped away, so maybe you can't answer that, but
I'm not sure what you mean by a scan of it. You mean as far as when policy meeting and when there's a finance meeting, is that what you mean by a scan of events? Or do you mean more bigger things like CCSTA and ASBA?
So in the creation of the positive path forward document, we had discussed having what was referred to at that time as an environmental scan, as to understand what's going on in the community, what some of the bigger items coming forward might be, and having discussions around those items on a continuous basis. And I was just wondering if that type of item was going to be part of our agenda moving forward, or if there was another plan for that item, in recognition that the chair is not here and maybe.
I'm sorry,
later.
I can't answer that. I'm not sure right now. So
Okay.
I'll have to check with Henry about that. Was there anything else as far as the annual work plan? And we'll go on to 6.11, the board calendar.
Sorry, Donna, can I just stop for one moment? I just had a
Yes.
question. In the point, it says approval of auditors in terms of engagement for renewal in applicable years. Do we need to do that? Is this an applicable year? It's the second point in January.
Auditors in terms of engagement for renewal. And the auditors have already been picked, and that was
Okay.
last year, I believe.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if this was an applicable year or if that was already done. So thank you.
You're welcome. And the board calendar, the next time we're meeting is the COSC meeting, January 27th at 6:30. Hopefully, have you had any responses to that? Do we know how many might be coming? at my board, at the school council meeting last night, unfortunately, I didn't have any volunteers, and so I'm hoping that we're gonna have quite a few from the other schools. Does anyone know? We'll
I
just-
don't have those, trustee Tugwood, updated numbers as of right now.
Okay. And then our next board meeting is February 16th, beginning with the committee of the whole meeting. Any other questions as far as the board calendar? The trustee expense claim is on there. Just be aware that this has been updated with a change in the mileage amount that is allowed. And if you have any trouble downloading it, you can talk to Kim. She'd be able to help you with how to put that onto your computer. And what do we got next? Board action sheet, and this is Mr. Bouchard.
Thank you. So policy committee, I've got quite a few things here. Consider adding language stating the appendices can require only one reading. Also language stating that a policy can move forward with multiple readings at one meeting. Consider a process for trustees to provide feedback for the committee as they work through their review. Refer to the rubric in policy 7. Policy 9 in the background, change the first paragraph to say board representative. Also add a membership clause. Policy 25, number 3, does the committee wish to outline any detail about what process will look like? A rubric or terms of reference. ASCA will notify school councils of the board's support for attendance at the 2022 annual conference as outlined in the motion. Masks will investigate the cost and acquisition timeline for KN95 masks. We'll email trustees with the information.
Thank you. Correspondence. I'm not aware if Henry had any. Is there any other correspondence, Mr. Bouchard, or do you know of anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so we're down to the closing prayer. Is there anything else before we close? Then you will join me with the prayer of St. Thomas Aquinas. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Grant me, O Lord, my God, a mind to know you, a heart to seek you, wisdom to find you, conduct pleasing to you, faithful perseverance in waiting for you, and a hope of finally embracing you. St. Thomas of Aquinas, pray for us. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you, everyone. So we've adjourned at 4:02.